I have a confession to make. I actually quite like the 2005 Shadow the Hedgehog game. It's an odd duck in the Sonic series, full of over-the-top edginess, but that almost makes it refreshing. Yeah, while I enjoy it, I have to recognise it has plenty of moments of jank, especially the controls that cause many deaths. Naturally, this made me a bit skeptical about the return of my favourite anti-hero to star in his own brand new campaign with Sonic X Shadow Generations. And I shouldn't have been. Not only is it a return to form for Shadow, but it features some of the best 3D Sonic levels in the series, period. That's all thanks to some really clever bits of level design and a solid understanding of what makes a speedy platformer fun to master. It's made all the more obvious by being packaged alongside a game that frankly feels worse in comparison. But to be fair to it, it is 13 years older. Don't get me wrong, I do love Sonic Generations. I replay it almost every year alongside my other favourite Sonic games. Not only is it a perfect way to speedrun through highlights of every previous game in the series up until its release, but its solid level design manages to balance both the hold down the button boost mechanics of the 3D modern sections with the slower paced jumping of the 2D classic sections. The Shadow Generations half of this remaster is something you select from a menu before either game actually loads up. It's no quick add-on, but a fully featured campaign in its own right. It follows Shadow's point of view as he also deals with being sucked into the Time Eater's white space dimension. And yeah, look, don't worry about it, it's not really explained in much more detail than this in the game either. On the face of it, it's much the same as Sonic Generations, as the black and red hog must blast through 6 levels from prior Sonic games, split into 2 acts that either favour 2D or 3D perspective with some boss fights along the way. Yeah, as soon as Shadow enters the scene, riding a grind rail on the Space Colony arc with a rockin' remix of Sonic Adventure 2's Highway in the Sky blaring in the back, the game immediately just feels different. Shadow is zippy, but he's not quite as fast as Sonic. But this suits the way his levels are designed, the cadence having you often stopping just briefly enough to pivot yourself towards the next path forward. Even his version of the homing attack, which here has him pop off a mini teleport to enemies, is more considered than Sonic's quicker dashes. Crucially, it's a pacing that allows you to feel in control of Shadow the whole time. He has more powers here than Sonic does in his respective half, so you constantly need to think a bit more about what option to deploy. Even the decision to split the homing attack and jump buttons is well managed, removing the chance of accidentally doing one move when you wanted to do the other. It also means you always have the choice to do Shadow's little second hop, which can act as a corrective element in the air. This is still a fast game you're meant to be able to blaze through, and Shadow Generations also allows you to play with the clock cycles of the levels themselves. Shadow's Chaos Spear move can stun enemies in place, and even move or damage hazards, sometimes paving the way to whole new routes in the process. It's a whole new verb to think about when approaching enemies in addition to the homing attack or double jump. Likewise, a Dragon Ball style Doom Blast beatdown allows you to toss certain enemies into the air to act as stepping stones to new paths, giving you a few seconds to choose where to dropkick them. It really gets you thinking. Do I swap from this grind rail with an enemy on it, or simply deactivate them? Do I drop down onto this other route, or stun an enemy mid-air and use them as another spring to reach a higher path? Similarly, allowing you to mess with the levels themselves is Chaos Control, a larger power that must be charged before use. Stopping time, and the level clock itself, everything becomes frozen in place. Not only can objects that hurt you, like missiles, become stepping stone platforms, but stage hazards that move back and forth are also affected. Not only are you reacting to what the levels throw your way in the moment, but you've also the power to preempt them. It's a big difference from Sonic Generations, where even in the 3D spaces, routes were often constrained vertically, whereas here, alternative routes are frequent, and short sections of speed constantly open up to wider sections with multiple ways to move through the space. Going wider here allows for more interplay between moving between those routes even when you're on them. It also makes tracking down each Act's 3 hidden medals a lot more fun, as it's simply clearer where they are. These medals just allow you to unlock concept art and the like. In comparison, the red rings in Sonic Generations were either traversally easy to find or rather annoying as you accidentally blazed by them on a one-way path. The 2D acts of Shadow Generations are something of a revelation that instead of feeling very separate from the 3D acts, they actually feel incredibly similar. Even in 2D, these spaces feel like 3D environments, constantly sending you in and out of the background or foreground or around corners. As you move, the camera even strategically pulls back at a slight angle in order to show you what lies ahead. Instead of being slower and depowered, Shadow is much the same, and has access to his full suite of powers, just the way they're used becoming recontextualized by the space itself. Chaos Spear, for instance, is much more useful for removing hazards when you're unable to move around them in 3-dimensional space. Some of the Doom powers have a bit of the wisp about them. While I liked the wisp powers in Sonic Colors well enough, I always felt like I was perhaps in the minority by finding them a touch too gimmicky. Occasionally, Shadow Generations' Doom powers feel the same. Doom Morph is always used in pools of purple ooze, for example, while Doom Surf is, yeah, you guessed it, used on water. But a lot of Shadow's powers can also be used creatively to navigate levels as well. Doom Wings can be so transformative that by the time you unlock them to use freely, Shadow Generations adds it as a toggle in Stage Select to track your time separately for each. Doom Wings' primary use comes in the game's final level across both of its acts, triumphantly weaving together the wider design from previous levels into spaces that feel truly open. There's a sense that you can use the wings to tear apart the levels, weaving around the skyscrapers that form the level's backdrop, but with a limitation on how long you can spend in the air and compelling points of platforming to stomp around, it manages to keep guiding you through the stage while teasing you with moments to save time or uncover secrets. Shadow Generations isn't simply about iterating on earlier Sonic platformers either. The White Space Hub, where you spend time between levels, is a fully explorable 3D environment that explicitly takes cues from Sonic Frontiers' open world approach. While Pop-In is still a very minor issue for the floating platforms that hide plenty of chests containing secrets, the hyper-condensed nature of them here greatly improves navigation and clarity, making your way through these short and sweet jumping challenges. While in Sonic Frontiers, most of Sonic's upgrades are about wrangling the blue blur into an open-world context, Shadow Generations' own power-ups are more playfully about the platforming itself, focused on re-examining the core loop of blasting through levels at high speeds. Shadow Generations is a short game. It took me about 5 hours on the first go-around, but I've already doubled that by returning to stages to mess around with them more and best my times. While some recent Sonic games have struggled with finding the series' identity, Shadow has strolled in wildly confident in how Sonic speed platforming should evolve. Talk about being the ultimate life form.